our first panel of this series. Y'all give me 1 second while I get my recording. Boom, there we go. All right. So again, peace family. Welcome to the 2024 UCSF REPAIR Teach In panel series entitled Black Birthing and Matrilineal Healing, Centering Community Voices. We are so honored to have y'all here, and we're wishing everybody a very happy Black Maternal Health Week. I am Dr. Ree, for those of you who don't know me. I am a postdoctoral fellow with UCSF REPAIR, and I'm the instructor for this course. To enhance accessibility, we use image description in this space. So before you speak, be sure to share about what is in your Zoom screen. So I will model for y'all. I have some braids that should have been took out, but it's all good. So it's a little fuzzy on the sides. I got a little swoop bang with my braids and cheetah print glasses and a zebra print headscarf with extra large beauty supply store gold hoops and hot pink lipstick with a black shirt that is representing the UCSF Black Women's Health and Livelihood Initiative. And my background is given Black girl magic fairy dust energy with pink fluffy pillows and plants. All right, so for folks who are not familiar with image descriptions, that's how we do that in this space for folks who may not be able to see us because of varying abilities. I am calling in from a lonely land known as the San Francisco Bay Area, and we are welcoming again folks who are calling in from all over. This series is hosted in partnership with UCSF REPAIR's Communiversity Certificate Program, as well as Black Women Healing. And to learn more about both of those things, you can check us out in the chat. You can also find a full land acknowledgement there as well. And we would love to see all of y'all's beautiful faces. So we invite everyone who feels comfortable to turn on your cameras at this time. And in this space, it is all good to show up as you are. So the bonnets, the babies, and the fur babies are all welcome. And shout out to our good sis Omo, who is already modeling for us how to be fly in a bonnet on the Zoom screen. We love to see it. So I am super excited to have y'all here for our very first panel of this series entitled Black Birthing Crisis and Radical Community Interventions. Before we begin, I just want to acknowledge that some of these conversations can be at times heavy, so please do what you need to do to take good care of yourself. Meet your needs, honor your needs, and be gentle with yourself in that process. I will now introduce our wonderful panelists. I'll share abbreviated bios, but you'll be able to find their full bios in our chat. So firstly, my good sis Amber McZeal is a PhD, a writer, a vocalist, a sacred scholar, an artivist, and founder of Decolonizing the Psyche, where she weaves somatic praxis with Afro-Indigenous spiritual technologies and social justice. Deep decoloniality in efforts to address cultural trauma, foster transformation, and create more humane social relationships. Come on, sis. Next, we have the wonderful Miss Linda Jones, who is a birth and postpartum doula, photographer, and mother of 2, grandmother of 4, and great-grandmother of 4. Yes, come on, matrilineal healing. She has been a part of the natural birth advocacy and reproductive justice community in the Bay Area for over 3 decades. So when I say OG status, y'all see what I'm saying. She is one of the co-founders of and executive director of Black Women Birthing Justice and is a co-author of Battling Over Birth, Black Women and the Maternal Health Crisis in California. Yes, so good to have you here, Miss Linda. And finally, we have my colleague, Markia Mays, LCSW, who is a clinical social worker and a clinical supervisor for the UCSF Child Trauma Research Program at Zuckerberg San Francisco General Hospital and Trauma Center. In 2018, she co-developed Embrace, which is an integrated behavior group prenatal care model for Black families at UCSF in partnership with reproductive medical providers from the UCSF National Center of Excellence in Women's Health. Yes, so good to have you here, Markia, Amber, Miss Linda. Thank y'all for taking time out of your busy schedules to share space with us today. And now that we know our lovely panelists, we can go ahead and dive into our panel discussion. Our panel will go until about 5 minutes after the hour, and we'll reserve the last 25 minutes or so for audience questions. So, without further ado, let's dive in. Let me make sure we got our good sis Markia on our, there you go. Hey, hey. So I would love to start off with just letting the folks know a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what being a birth worker means to you. And we can start with whoever's feeling moved to dive in first. Hey, Miss Linda, I see you off mute, so we could go ahead and start with you.
You know, say in the presence of the elder, it is only fitting. We stand on
first. Stand in your shadow.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here and be asked to be a part of this. I'm not sure about the whole descriptive thing. It's not, I have on a blue sweater and I have a kind of bone hook necklace on. I have dreads that are piled on top of my head, but you can't really see that with my filter. But anyway, I'm known kind of affectionately, I think, around the Bay as Mama Linda, so you can call me that. I spend most of my time these days working and training Black doulas, mainly to be a part of the Medi-Cal bill, which was passed so that people who are on Medi-Cal have the capacity to hire a doula free of charge to them, and Medi-Cal pays for it. The issue is that there's not a lot of doulas around that are Medi-Cal providers yet. So we're trying to train up a bunch of them so that people will be able to take advantage of that benefit. I work with Beloved Birth Black Centering as a consultant with their Black Centering program, and I run the doula program for them. So anybody that goes through their Black Centering gets to have a free doula, and I match them up with doulas so they can have doulas. And I also take their pictures for them. I think it's really important that we see beautiful images of Black women pregnant, so that when you see a Black woman pregnant, we don't think, oh God, somebody else died. I don't want that to be the message. I want the message to be that they're beautiful, they're strong, and empowered. And so I take pictures of them to show them that. And I also take their birth pictures if they choose to have that done too. So that's what I'm doing. Mostly training people right now. I still go to a birth every now and then, but not too much anymore. And why am I doing this work? It's because I absolutely love it. I've been doing this for a long time, both birth and postpartum. I started out doing postpartum work because that's the part that kind of gets left off the whole situation on the perinatal period. There's all this stuff about how to get pregnant, be pregnant, and give birth, and then they send you home with this 5 to 10 pound thing, and you have no idea what to do with it. And so I wanted to address that part and help people figure out what they brought home and have that first few weeks of baby's life go smoothly. And then I got trained to do birth work and been doing that ever since. So I've been doing both of them for the whole period of time that I've been a doula. I was known mostly for doing postpartum with multiple, so I spent a lot of time with twins and triplets. helping people figure out what to do with that situation. I really enjoyed it. It was easy for me, and it was fun teaching them how to maneuver that whole situation. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Mama Linda. I really appreciate hearing about your journey, and it's such an honor for us to be here and learn from you. So thank you. I'll pass it to my good sis Amber next, and then we can close out our introductions with Marquita.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and put it on the gallery here. So thank you so much, Dr. Ree. Thank you to your team for hosting this space during this week. I'm delighted to be here, to be in community, to share, to grow, to exchange collective knowledge. My name is Amber. I'm originally from Louisiana. My people go back in those lands to about the late 1700s, early 1800s. Before that, my people hailed from Haiti, parts of West Africa, Congo, Mali, Nigeria, Senegal, as well as parts of Europe, mainly France and Spain, and have a little bit of indigenous ancestry from the Southeast United States. I moved to the Bay Area in 2006 post-Katrina, which I call the glory wave affectionately, after many years of soul tending. So what do I do? The official title is I'm a community liberation, indigenous, and ecological depth psychologist. My work, my focus centered on decolonizing maternal health care. So in a nutshell, what I would say, it was interesting when you asked what brought you to birth working, or how do you offer that work in the world. I have never called myself a birth worker out of respect for the people on the front lines, in the care rooms, the midwives, the doulas, etc. But my focus has been on the institution of birthing, medicalized birthing, and how that was distorted through colonialism, through chattel enslavement. Something that I discovered during my, what I call a sacred scholarship journey, because it was spirit-led. We talk about slavery, we talk about the critique of capitalism, but always eclipsed, always invisible is the central role of birthing and the distortion of birthing to create the free labor that could generate the wealth for those elites. So my emphasis, my focus has been on what I now call tending the ghosts of the institution. So how some of the practices, the attitudes, the dismissals, the callous behavior and treatment experienced by Black women and others has a long runway. It has a continuum that can be traced. So that's what I do in the world. I consult with San Francisco Department of Public Health, along with other smaller community organizations. I had the delight of working with a birth worker who's using her training as a midwife to train others in midwifing the soul. So she's using the principles of birthing and great care in the midwifery practice and applying it to social justice pursuits. So I'll pause there. And again, just delighted to be in company with all of you.
Thank you so much, sis, for that powerful introduction. I appreciate you so much. And I'll just share to add on to my sis introduction that we actually met in Brazil in 2018, and that too was very spirit-led. So it's just a blessing to be in community with you, sis. And oh yes,
I'm sorry, I didn't honor your request about the image description, and know that I'm gonna get to Brazil in a minute.
okay.
It's led everything, but the image, I'm wearing a black shirt. I have black hair that's slicked back. I have a red scarf and a necklace made of wood, which is actually from Brazil. It's green, red, and brown wood. I have dark red lips, and that's about it.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. And we can come to Markia to close us out for our introductions.
Hey everyone. So I am wearing a black sleeveless shirt with some gold accessories. Growing my pixie back out, so got a little short haircut. The sides used to be shaved. With I guess I don't even know how to describe this background. It's kind of got like an Afrofuturistic vibrancy of colors and images on the walls and patterns and whatnot. Let's see. I am a clinical social worker by training. But before I became a clinical social worker, I think everything that informed how I moved through the world as a clinician. I am a daughter, granddaughter, an auntie, a cousin, a sister, and a wife. And all of those roles growing up between San Francisco and South Carolina, really going back and forth between this city and country mix has informed how I show up with the families that I've had the honor to be in relationship with. What do I do? So many different things. I like Amber, I don't really consider myself a birth worker. I've come to the perinatal workforce very at the sort of later part of my career. Before that, I've been steeped in infant and early childhood, and particularly trauma in infant and early childhood, and saw families with kids from birth to 5 who've experienced trauma, doing a form of treatment called child-parent psychotherapy. It's a dyadic relational treatment where both parent and child are in the room at the same time, helping them navigate the narrative and recovering from some pretty horrendous things that shouldn't have to happen to little ones. And I think that work is what brought me to the perinatal work that I currently do. Got to a point where I hit sort of 2 things. One, wanted to know what it would be like to work with families before the babies got here, before the kiddos got here, and wanting to be ahead of some of the adversities that the kids have experienced that I used to see. That, and then I also got to a point where I was tired of not working in spaces that weren't all Black. And finally sort of put my foot down and said that I wanted to work in an all Black space, wanted to work unapologetically and committed to Black families, and sat across the table from Dr. Andrea Jackson, who's an OB, and Melinda Fowler, who is a midwife, when they were getting ready to start centering pregnancy for Black women. And I raised my hand and said, hey, have y'all thought about integrating in mental health into this component of work that y'all are doing? And they said, yeah, and I joined. And from there was the beginning of Embrace starting. So primarily what I've done for the program that we built is I've integrated mental health, a mental health component, into pregnancy and postpartum for the Black families that we see. I think that wraps up me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Markia. I really appreciate you. And Markia and I met since my time at UCSF, and I have been so inspired by the work of the Black Women's Health and Livelihood Initiative, which again, I'm representing on my shirt today. So y'all be sure to check them out. They do amazing, incredible work. And I'm just grateful that that space exists at UCSF. They also have a Black Wellness Center within the National Center of Excellence for Women's Health. So for folks who are at UCSF, if y'all are not tapped in already, please get tapped in. They are at the Mount Zion campus and just really doing a lot of incredible work, not only with birth and families, but also with folks in need of care and community. So yes, thank you, thank you. My next question is for Miss Linda. So I know that you have a really long history of advocating for Black birth and justice, and y'all, Thank you for your patience with us in our spotlights. Our good sis Ange is working it out. So bear with us with all of the spotlight shifts. We are about to have it snatched in a second. So thank you. But I will say, Miss Linda, you have a long history of advocating for Black birthing. And in the last several years, we've seen so much more about the Black birthing crisis. And I'm just wondering if you can talk to us, just for folks who may have no idea, like what exactly is the Black birthing crisis, and how have you seen things change in the past 3 decades since you've been doing this work?
Yeah, I don't like to just look at myself, so I'm going back to gallery.
It's all good.
Yeah, it's hard for me to think that no one that's Black, as a Black woman, has not heard about what the maternal crisis is. But for those who may not have, a few years back, not sure how long ago now, but headlines started popping up about how Black women were dying and giving birth 3 to 4 times more than white women. And that's kind of a minimum. That's here in California. I think it's 2 to 4 times more in California. New York was up to 12 times. And New Jersey was like 7 times. And these are things that are happening, now, which is beyond incredible to me that, Black women are dying like this. And the biggest thing about that is that 80% of those deaths could have been stopped. They didn't have to happen. And what it has caused is one that's good for doulas and birth workers is that Black women now are seeking out doulas because they're trying to do everything they can to prevent, dying in the hospital or having adverse reactions. And one of the way you can do that is to have a doula with you, to advocate for you, to listen to what's going on, to explain to what's going on, to help you ask questions, when most people that go into the hospital think that they aren't allowed to ask any questions. They're supposed to just go in and do whatever the doctors say. And the reason that this is happening is not because we're of the Black race. It's not that we're broken as Black people. Black women have been having babies forever, and safely, and having them with granny midwives that protected them and took care of them, and there wasn't this issue. And the reason is that they're Black in America, and America is a racist country. And the racism is in all of our institutions. It's systemic, it's institutional, and it's, personal. And so what happens when people go into the hospital is that they aren't listened to. So if something's going wrong with their bodies and they try to tell somebody, it's just, shrugged off, or they say, we'll be back later, or whatever excuse they give to not take care of them. And by the time they do get back to them, they're bleeding out, or some other terrible thing is happening and it can't be fixed. So the biggest thing is they don't listen to Black women, and they don't respect, us as a race. And these things are what's happening. It's always been going on. I think it's worse now, actually, than it was when I started, if you can believe that. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that since, I think probably since COVID or right before, we started inducing everyone to have their baby. No one can go into labor on their own. Everything is an induction for whatever reason. And they use scare tactics and fear to make people go along with what they're saying. And we really need to start pushing back on that. The fact that you're of a certain age, or the fact that you've gone, a day or two past what they thought was your due date, which is a fictional number that someone pulls out, 9 months before time. Only 5% of people have their baby on that date. And these are not reasons to go in and have your baby blasted out of your body. And it takes a long time. It's not, they present it as, oh, let's come in and get this baby out. And so what you hear is, I'm going to go in, my baby's going to be born tonight. That's not how it works. It's a, minimum 3-day process, most likely 5 to 6 days. which usually ends in a C-section because all the things that they try to do don't work. And so then they have a C-section. And Black women have more C-sections than anyone else as well, for whatever reasons. And we have to stop that. We have to push back against that. We need to teach our young women that they have choices in birth. You know, they can have doulas, they can have midwives. Teach them what midwives are. Teach them that they can have their baby at home, which is probably the safest place for a Black person to have their baby right now. They need to know this at a young age, middle school, you know, start talking to them about it at that point. By the time someone's 35, 40, they've already been so indoctrinated into what they should do, they're afraid to push the envelope and do anything different. And so they suffer the consequences of that. So birth in America is not very pretty for anybody, but it's really bad for Black women.
Thank you so much, Miss Linda. I appreciate just like the knowledge and the context. And I'm wondering if you could share too, like, have you seen things change in the last maybe 5 to 10 years since you first started this work, now that the conversation is happening much more than it was before?
The change is that we're seeing more doulas, we're seeing more Black doulas, we're seeing more midwives trying to get through midwifery school wherever they can find it. You know, UCSF, bless their hearts, used to be the only one that had a program, and they now messed that up by saying it has to be a doctoral program. And then, you know, you don't need a doctorate to be a midwife. So that's kind of gone away for most people. And there's just not a lot of midwifery schools. Jenny Joseph in Florida has the first Black one, but there's just not a lot of opportunity for people to get that training. And we should be going that route. We should be looking at funding birth centers and funding midwives, because they don't have the same bad outcomes that people have in the hospital. So those things have changed, but the whole medicalization of birth has gotten much worse, much worse.
Thank you, Miss Linda. And I'll just say our next panel, which will be in 2 weeks, will be with Bria is one of our panelists, and she also is a doula, and she's in school now training to be a midwife. And her and Mahogany, who are going to be on a panel together, will talk about the program they did for teaching Black teen girls about doula training. So, and also just, you know, what folks need to know around birthing. So it's happening slowly but surely. I appreciate what you're saying about like educating our communities young about what is possible for their birthing journey. So thank you so much.
It's really important for them to know that, so that they learn to ask questions. You know, we are afraid as Black women to ask questions when we're in that vulnerable situation, because it's so easy for them to call CPS on us. You know, they don't do it for anybody else, but you know, they're very quick if you push back too much to call CPS. And so people are afraid that they're not going to be able to take their baby home. So they don't really make a lot of, you know, waves when they go into the hospital, but they have rights. And they need to learn what those rights are. There's a whole Black woman's birthing rights bill that's online that you can Google and find, that tells you what your rights are in the hospital. So we need to stop being afraid to speak up and to advocate for ourselves, or to hire a doula to take with you to the hospital. That's birth.
Thank you so much, Miss Linda. And I know, Amber, you had started to talk about this before, just about like the institutions, right, that have caused and continue to cause harm. And I know your current research on radical love traditions teaches us about these things and about what you call decolonial terms in Black maternal health care. I'm wondering if you could share more about like what exactly is the relationship between colonization and Black birthing experiences, and how have you witnessed Black folks decolonizing their birthing journeys?
Sure. So I want to start by just laying a little bit of, first of all, honor and respect to Elder Miss Linda for the work you've been doing and that you continue to do. It's a, yeah, it's a tremendous gift and honor to come after the work you and others have already set forward. So let's start by just making it plain. To decolonize is a practice of wholeness making, to make whole. That's all it means. And that was insight gifted to me by a teacher and mentor while I was going through the academic journey, because we can get lost and mired in all of the words, but it just means wholeness making. And that relates to, well, what are we making whole? Everything that has been splintered, the false separations, the illusion of separation. That's what colonization did. It falsely separated people. It falsely separated the human family. It made up all kinds of pseudoscience, medical racism to justify the separation. That turned into longstanding beliefs and then policies and laws. Those laws moved money, set imperatives, intentions, and goals, etc. So those are the waters we're swimming in. I want to circle back to Brazil because the wholeness making, you know, for me, I really had to check and sort of manage the amount of toxic stress that doing this kind of work can conjure in the body. Even as somebody who's just researching and writing, you know, works, essays, whatever, encountering the material, which can be heartbreaking, is heartbreaking. And so Radical Love Traditions is what I titled the dissertation, and it's modeled after my experience in Brazil, where I met beloved Ree and receiving this doll. It's called an Abayomi doll. So the story about this doll in Bahia, Salvador, Brazil, when a slave ship, a Portuguese vessel, arrived on the shore and the enslaved were exiting, there was an infant who could not be consoled. Crying, no amount of milk, no amount of tata, you know, cooing would do anything to console the child. So one of the elder women who met these enslaved persons coming out of the vessel, she was already in Brazil, she had on a pitch black garment, and she tore strips of it. And with the strips, she tied little knots and she made a doll. And she placcated the doll, you know, played with the child, and the child was calmed. And so in Brazil, in Bahia, they named this doll the Abayomi doll. And Abayomi is a shortened version of a Yoruba word. The long translation of it means, they buried me, but didn't know I was a seed. And so when I was gifted this by a Brazilian lawyer, it was the Decolonizing Black Feminism summer school that we attended in Brazil. So this Bahian gifted me this, and I said, wow, can you imagine the amount of love that has to be in your body amidst the conditions, the atrocities, the dehumanization, the violence, the transgressions? Can we imagine the amount of love they had to conjure and carry to be able to do something like this and more? So I said, if that existed, if they had the capacity to do that, we got to do a Sankofa and keep weaving that radical love forward. Radical meaning root, and that's there. So it awakened me to the fact that even while colonization happened, decoloniality was a concurrent stream, two rivers running at the same time. The minute somebody said you're not human, somebody else, Black women, African descended women, asserted, yes, I am. Right? Yes, I am. So my heart is devoted to continually awakening that memory in us. And to Miss Linda's point,
Oh, wow.
Vilify the voice, empower the voice to speak up for ourselves, to practice greater care with our bodies. So now to pivot, saying more about the relationship between colonization and Black birthing. In my journey, I'm gonna tell y'all an embodied story here because the image, speaking of image description, was so vivid in my mind that it rendered me with writer's block for like 3 to 5 months. There was a book called The American Slave Coast that I read. And the first chapter is titled The Capitalized Womb. The Capitalized Womb. What these two authors assert from New Orleans, as a matter of fact, was that the Black womb, uterus, was the first factory of colonization. It was the thing that got pushed and pushed and pushed to produce ongoing, constantly expanding and increasing production. That's one of the principles of our economic system, capitalism. But it was refined and perfected on the Black female body. So that's the intersection between colonization and Black birthing. Is colonization was fueled by the lifeblood of it. It needed bodies. It still needs bodies. It needs bodies and life force to extract in order to produce wealth, money, in order to generate profit for somebody. And while that has over the decades changed, like the groups of people have changed, industrialization, in new immigration laws brought in migrant labor from the South and from the global South to do the work, right? But capitalism always needs bodies that it can exploit and extract life force or energy from to produce wealth. So that's the intersection. I'll pause there and happy to expand more later or in the Q&A dialogue. But to your final question, how have I witnessed Black folks decolonizing birthing? Along with what Ms. Linda already articulated, the doulas and midwives being covered by state and federal funds is a big deal. It cannot be understated because it is an institutional shift. The granny midwives had a whole propaganda campaign that pathologized and demonized them to push them out of birthing practices in the mid-20th century, right? So to have the institution having sort of a turn, changing the course, is a huge deal. That's one way. And all of the advocates, I was fortunate to work with a few, Zaya Malawi and others in San Francisco Public Health, partnering with UCSF and USF. So that's one. Just in our social media streets, all of the folks who are now interested in reviving the home birth practices in light of how dangerous it is to go into the hospitals. Anyone who's promoting that as a viable choice, that as practicing and embodying a greater care ethic, to take into your own hands the sacredness and the process of bringing new life into the world, got a shout out to them. Some of the other ways I've witnessed decolonizing birthing, Black folks decolonizing birthing, is those who are working around transforming curriculums. They're still teaching that Black people feel pain differently and that our skin functions differently, from medication to touch to incision, etc. This is medical racism. This is pseudoscience from like the 1800s with J. Marion Sims and his cronies. It's unbelievable that this is still being taught. And what I found in my research, A minuscule amount is in the textbooks, Texas McGraw-Hill, right? But the majority of it comes in oral transmission, in the rounds where doctors are in their residencies and the elder doctors are transmitting, oh, you got to make sure not to listen to them and their cries of pain because they're often drug addicts, that whole pathologizing of Black bodies, and they're just trying to get drugs. That's what leads to, sometimes leading to the dismissal of pain, pain complaints among Black women and Black birthing people. Yeah, so that this is why, you know, I'm passionate about focusing on the institution, because the institution is the ecosystem. It's conditioning, socializing, and training our minds. These institutions, especially knowledge production, what gets validated as knowledge, right? All of that is the other battleground. And it's where coloniality lives. It's where it still exists and it persists like a spell that's been cast. The birthing justice work here in the Bay, I mean, we're lucky, we're fortunate to live amongst the change agents here. I worked closely with Dr. Monica McLemore and her radical reproductive justice work and advocacy, especially policy advocacy. And she's nonstop, Capricorn, she just doesn't quit. So I will pause there and turn it over back to you, Ree.
Thank you so much, sis. So powerful. I'm just so moved by the work that you're doing. And I know you mentioned Monica McLemore. I still haven't got to connect with her yet, but for those of y'all who don't know, she was a UCSF legend, no longer at UCSF, but yeah, has done amazing work. And my co-postdoc, Norlisa, worked very closely with her, doing some amazing birthing advocacy work for Black folks. So thank you for just bringing her name into the space and for, again, all the work that you're doing. And I know that you and Miss Linda both have kind of talked some with us about like the sorts of interventions that we see amidst the institutional dysfunction. And so, Marquita, I know that the work that you do is such an important piece of that. And so I would love if you could share more with us about the community interventions that you've witnessed, and particularly about Embrace. Like, what is Embrace? How does it work? And how does it support birthing Black families?
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely want to acknowledge the work of our elders like Mama Linda, who have come through and like laid the pathway for a program like Embrace to exist and to start. I would say like the community interventions at work is when we show up like Power Rangers on the behalf of our families. I literally think that that's what Embrace is a bunch of Black providers. We're a race concordant program. While our families are still birthing in these hospital systems, we always go back and forth to this question, like removing ourselves out of UCSF and becoming an entity outside of it. And it's complicated because our families are still birthing in these hospitals. And while they're still birthing in these hospitals, we get to see a lot of the grievances that they go through, even with a program like ours. So Embrace is a race concordant perinatal care program. We are an all-Black team serving all Black families in San Francisco. We work with families from pregnancy through the first year of life for the child. Our families are trying to push us to stay around until kiddos turn 3. If there was enough funding for us to do that, we totally would. We initially started off with the model of centering pregnancy and quickly learned with our families that there was more that was needed to get them across the finish lines of birthing, and then to hold them exactly where Mama Linda said, in that postpartum period where things get real after the baby comes home. So we thought initially we're going to offer this curriculum that gets you through pregnancy, get you through birthing, introduce the babies to each other and be out. And our families taught us, nah, that's not all that we need. We need a whole lot more. And so over, like I would say, our initial 4 pilots, we offered group prenatal care. to families. We tried to start off with like 8 to 10 families in a group who were all expected around the same time and would go through psychoeducation of different parts of being pregnant, preparing for childbirth, preparing for a newborn. And because we quickly learned this is not just about the birthing person, but the birthing person and their village, we quickly downsized from 8 to 10 families to 5 to 6 families, because their partners also became involved, which they should be involved. And that's when we switched from not just being a program for pregnant women and for birthing bodies, but a perinatal program for the entire family. So partners are part of the process from beginning to end. They have a care provider team of a Black OB, a Black midwife, a Black mental health clinician, a Black lactation consultant, and a Black patient navigator, someone who helps connect to resources throughout their entire time with us. So like I said, it's really like a team of Power Rangers surrounding each Black family that comes through our care. Again, we thought this mental health component, one of our first pilots, one of our mamas experienced a death during her pregnancy, and we tried to get her connected to mental health. And because of the stigma of mental health and engaging with, oh, now there's a problem, you see that there's something wrong with me, she did not engage in the services. And so we just flipped the script. The next pilot cohort that came around, we offered it at the very beginning of the services to this package care of not just your prenatal care alone, but perinatal mental health in conjunction, and gave every family at the beginning of their OB intake the opportunity to participate with a race concordant perinatal mental health provider. And then we took this angle of coming at it from being preventative, coming at it from an angle of letting them take the lead of how they want to deal with their emotional well-being during pregnancy, giving them an opportunity to sift through whatever intergenerational things that they wanted to tackle, and not carry and transform down the line the things that they did want to keep and hold on to. So we have this concept called ghosts in the nursery and angels in the nursery. And so being able to sit with families during pregnancy, what ghosts in the nursery do we need to let go of, and what angels in the nursery do we need to hold tight onto for this next generation. The mental health clinician stays with the family, like I said, through the first year of life. Our lactation component of our program, every family gets 3 lactation sessions before birth, and then they get 3 sessions after birth. And if there's additional lactation support that's needed because of complications and our struggles with infant feeding, they have access to that lactation consultant throughout their pregnancy. So that's what we've grown into as a program. We have, once word got out, there's an all-Black team, and particularly a all-Black team with Black mental health. Our wait list got really full. We were a team of like 4 people trying to manage all the referrals that came in. I initiated conversations with our Department of Public Health, trying to figure out how can we expand this program within the city and county of San Francisco. So since we've started, we've also got Black centering over at ZSFG that's led by a midwife, Asmara. Over in the East Bay, I think they all started around the same time that we did. Beloved Birth is also a program that functions in the same way that we do, where it's Black Power Rangers showing up for our families, essentially. Even though we had these kind of interventions where we are surrounding our families with support, we find that no matter what we do, it's during labor and delivery where it all goes down. And because babies come when they come, and not necessarily when any of our providers are going to be on shift, we still have to deal with a lot of grievances of things, very atrocious things that happens to our families during that time. So one of the things that we started doing was we have a WhatsApp group that the provider team is connected to the family around 35 weeks, and they have the opportunity to be in touch with their provider care team until they go into labor and delivery. While they're in labor and delivery, we are usually on the back end. If something happens on labor and delivery and one of us is not there on the team, as in they're not being heard, they're being dismissed, their pain is not being acknowledged, all they have to do is hit us up on that WhatsApp. And then on the back end, we're going into their charts, we're figuring out who is on the floor, we are flagging people, and we're saying, hey, listen up, this is an embraced family, either you act right or either there's going to be consequences for it. So it comes with some good and some bad. I would say that a lot of the L&D people are now terrified of an embraced family when they come on the floor, because they know they're going to be held accountable for whatever goes down during that unit. But that's what we got to do. That's what we got to do until they can figure out how to act right, and or until we figure out how to completely extract ourselves out of these systems and build our own, so that we don't need to rely on them. So in a gist, that's Embrace. We have built partnerships with community doula programs. So Sister Web, shout out to them. They are in San Francisco. They have the Kindred Birth Companions, which is an all-Black doula team that we utilize for our families. There is Nourishing Pregnancies, which is led by Brianna, which is a meal delivery program that offers food boxes to our families during pregnancy and through postpartum. We have our Black Infant Health Program. We have Rafiki Coalition, which is very well known in our community for being able to provide wellness and holistic services, acupuncture, prenatal massages, all sorts of things. And so we're really trying to figure out how to bring in this community, this home birth field into the hospital setting, at least for our families, the ones that we're focused on. We are in conversation currently with UCSF of being able to establish our own clinic. And I'm just going to say this here to manifest it. We told them we want our own labor and delivery unit, completely separate from whatever it is they got going on in the hospital, so that we can have more control over what happens to our families. So we're pushing and advocating as much as we possibly can to get these systems to really hold themselves accountable and to acknowledge what it is that they need to do. And what that is let us do what we need to do. We are the ones that we've been waiting for. We don't need y'all. We good. We got this. Just get out the way, hand over the resources. And that's what we've been doing, is trying to figure out how to snatch these reparations, how to snatch these resources, put the right people in place, and support our families the way that they need to be supported. So in a nutshell, that's Embrace. It started off with this one little small thing, and it's then grown into this whole other program.
Wow. Thank you so much, Marquita. I just love hearing more, because again, I've been around at the Black Wellness Center. I be hearing about Embrace, but I never got the full breakdown, and I knew bits and pieces. But it's incredible to just hear the ways that y'all are changing lives and saving lives. And you talked about Dr. Andrea, and I just want to also shout her out, who does amazing work with Embrace as well. And it's such an inspiring model. It gives so many folks hope, In our next panel, like I mentioned, Bria and Mahogany will be on there. Breezy is another panelist that's going to be on there who went through Embrace. So we'll look forward to hearing more from her as well about her Embrace journey. And real quick, I'm just wondering if you could share for folks, how can people sign up? I know you said y'all got a long waiting list, but what is the process of folks getting on that waiting list? And then also some of the other offerings that you had mentioned that are similar, how can people sign up and tap into those resources?
Absolutely. So folks can go to our website, embraceblackcare.org. If you go to the service offerings, there's a referral link, and there's 2 referral links. There's one for UCSF birthing families, and then there's one for San Francisco birthing families who don't birth at UCSF. We're in partnership right now with Rams Inc., where they can provide the other components of care that we've built out for Embrace beyond the prenatal care. And so they offer the perinatal mental health, they offer postpartum support, they offer doula services and lactation services with Tonifer, who's known all over the Bay Area. They've contracted with her. So that's probably the easiest way to get in contact with us. And Michelle, our patient navigator, who everybody loves, will reach out to you and have a one-on-one and figure out, how to support and how to get the families looped in. We do have a long waiting list, but we figure it out. Somehow we figure it out. people figure out how to get themselves in.
I love it. And yes, Michelle was my student when I was a professor at Merritt's. So it's wonderful to know that Michelle is also doing great work with Embrace as well. And I seen folks just putting in the chat, like, this is such an inspiring model. We have folks calling in from all across the country, folks from Louisiana, Atlanta, Maryland. So like just the inspiration that this is happening here in San Francisco, and it's a model that can be replicated in other spaces as well. So
Yeah,
thank you.
I'll say that it wasn't easy. We got a lot of hate, continue to deal with a lot of hate. But find your Power Rangers, essentially. Find your Power Rangers, and be 10 toes down. I think that's been the thing that has helped us since the very beginning. We've kept our heads down and we focused on doing the work and letting the work speak for itself. But find your Power Rangers.
Shay, thank you so much, Marquita. And you mentioned something that really spoke to my spirit about like the angels in the nursery and the ghosts in the nursery. And I shared this with my students, but I'll share it here as well. This is my great granny Annie, and she's from South Carolina. So I heard you representing South Carolina in the space as well. And she's a big reason why I decided to teach this course, because I just got a spiritual ancestral message about myself needing to learn these things to break generational curses. And so when you talked about that, like the angels in the nursery and the ghosts in the nursery, it just brought up the reality of like us doing our matrilineal healing, doing our intergenerational healing is not only for ourselves, but it's for the 7 generations before us and the 7 generations after us. And as y'all know, the course is called Black Birthing and Matrilineal Healing, because the intention is to emphasize that the birthing and the healing are happening at the same time. So with that, I want to invite Mama Linda back to the stage, and I would love to hear about your matrilineal healing journey, particularly with the ways that you talk about your doula journey starting because of your mother. And I was so inspired to read your website and see that. So you talked about how your mom was a doula for you, even if that wasn't like a term, right, that was used, and how that inspired you to begin your doula work. And I just wondered if you might share a bit more about that, and also your relationship with your daughters and your grandchildren and your great-grandchildren, because you have such a powerful lineage that you are just continuing to pour into. Like, I could just see it in the ways that you talk about yourself on your website, which was really inspiring.
Yeah, I had no idea what a doula was at that time. And I was a teen mom. I was just turning 16 when I had my daughter, and got pregnant in a very traumatic way. And it was at a time when it wasn't cool for a teenager to be pregnant. Now it's not a big deal, but back then in the 18th century, it was. And so I had the trauma and the shame of being pregnant at 16 and dealing with that. But my mom never judged me. She was there for me the whole time. And she was with me. I ended up marrying the person that traumatically got me pregnant because I didn't know what else to do at 16, and that was not pretty. But she was always there for me, and she got me out of it, and was just there. I didn't feel the stress of being a teen mom after my baby was born, because she was there to help me. And she helped me with no judgment. And that's what a doula does. What a postpartum doula does is comes in and helps you with no judgment. And I don't really know what I would have done without her, because it was a time that was really traumatic for me, but she got me through it. And I could have ended up in a whole different space if it wasn't for her. And so I look at teen moms and praise them for being who they are. And they're also treated very badly in the hospital, because they're not listened to at all, and, either judged or have some preconceived notion about who they are and such. I became a doula, people always say, well, how did you become a doula? And I say the joke is that the universe did this to me because I guess they wanted me to walk this path, even though I didn't know there was such a path to walk. And I say that because I became pregnant with my second daughter when my first daughter was 21. So my girls are 21 years apart. And so I got pregnant and was hoping it was a tumor, but it wasn't. And so I had her, and I was going through childbirth classes, and I met this young Jewish woman, and we became friends. And our babies are 12 days apart, and we were a mom's group of 2. And so we just kind of, met up every week with each other and had ice cream and turkey sandwiches and breastfed our babies together. And I was in the process of getting a divorce and going through the whole thing and figuring out what I was going to do after that for work, and not wanting to go back to corporate America because I hated it. And she happened to say, well, I have a friend in New York, and she does something with pregnant women, and it starts with D. I can never remember the word, but you should call and talk to her. And she said that because in the short time that we knew each other, she found out that my favorite age of human is a newborn. And the joke around me is that, once you turn 1, I'm not really I really don't care for it anymore. I only like newborn babies that I can cuddle. So I called her friend and talked to her for about 2 hours on the phone, and hung up the phone and had one of those aha light bulb moments of, I could make a living just hanging out with babies for the rest of my life. And I thought, yeah, this is what I want to do. So in my past life, I worked for corporate America, and I worked for Xerox in marketing and sales. So I used all the crap that they taught me there from the time I was 16 till I was 31 and ran off and went sailing. I used all the stuff that I learned there and marketed myself in a time before the internet, before social media, before any of that stuff. I just made a little flyer and stuck it up wherever I thought a pregnant woman would be. And then I also worked with a parent resource center in Berkeley. And again, it was before the internet. So if you wanted to find out anything about pregnancy, they had a phone line that you could call into. So I would work at the phone line twice a week and answer people's questions about where they could find out, resources about being pregnant. And so I got my first client through there because someone called and she said, I'm a mom, I'm about to have twins. I have a 3-year-old and I just need somebody to help me. I said, oh, well, there's this organization called The First 6 Weeks. This woman's name is Linda. You should give her a call. So she called me and she was my first client. So it went from there. And I also volunteered when I decided I wanted to do birth. I went to a midwife here in Berkeley, in Fuller, and she was giving doula classes, and it was like a weekend kind of thing. And so I took her course. She assumed you knew how babies got there and how they got out, but she taught the emotional part that doulas do. And so I went through that course, and then I was the only Black woman in the course. And there was a clinic opening up at the same time, right after we got trained, that had a clinic for low income and uninsured people. And so we went to that clinic. There was about, I don't know, maybe 8 to 10 of us that had been trained or had just recently been trained somewhere, and said, you're opening this clinic. Is it okay if we come and volunteer to get experience? And they said, of course, we don't have to pay you, come do it. And so we made a little flyer again that said, we're doulas, this is what a doula is. If you'd like to have a doula, tell us a little bit about who you'd like to have with you, and we'll try to match you up with somebody. So of course, many of them were young teen moms or young Black women, and they'd say, well, I want somebody older than me and I want somebody Black. So older or younger, I was the only Black one. So I felt if they had the sense enough to ask, I would be there for them. So I did 4 or 5 births a month for a year while I was still doing postpartum work, and worked with them. And it was such a great education because they saw midwives in the clinics and in the clinic, and then they delivered at Delta Bates with midwives. So I learned the midwifery model of care for people. It was also a time when epidurals were not picked up by Medi-Cal. So if they want, again, we don't feel pain. What do you need an epidural for? So if they wanted any kind of pain med, they'd have to pay themselves out of pocket. And of course, they couldn't do that. So I learned how to be with someone who was not medicated and help them get through the birth. So it was a really great education for me to do that for a year. And that was the beginning of my career. And then after that, I started charging a little bit of something for it. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Miss Linda. I really appreciate you sharing your journey with us to this work. And, we talked before everyone came into the room just about like the spirit-led work that all of us do in our own ways. And I just appreciate you sharing just how spirit-led it was for you to kind of arrive at this work. And as everyone has reiterated, it's just really an honor to be witnessing your journey and to have you here, like sharing with us as someone who has made such a huge impact on Black birthing locally and globally. So thank you.
I appreciate that because, I don't know how much longer I got here, but I really appreciate the fact that I've become someone that young women, respect and want to follow. Because I have to leave it in the hands of somebody because this mess is not going to be fixed anytime soon. And I was laughing when Markia was talking about how the hospital is afraid when embrace clients come in because the same thing is happening with beloved. It's like, oh God, it's a beloved client. You talk to them, listen to them. We have to, and it's the Black nurses that are making the worst, complaint. I'm like, come on, people, let's decolonize a little bit, let's not do this to each other, but it's more work for them to have to listen to people and to pay attention and know that if they do something, there's somebody's going to call up Jaisha or call up Mama Linda and say, what are you doing? And so they don't like that. And it's too bad, but if that's what it has to be, that's what it has to be. We have to keep pushing through because, I talk about all the, the bad stuff that are in the headlines, but we have to find joy back into this. Birth is supposed to be a joyous rite of passage for women. And if we take the joy of it and just worry about the scary part and being so fearful of giving birth, that's not good. We need to let young women know. That's why I said get them young and teach them that it is supposed to be joy. It's just not supposed to be scary. I can't tell you how many women are telling me that they're afraid to have a baby, and that it breaks my heart. If somebody wants to have a baby, then they should be open to having it and have a joyous occasion. That's what birth justice is having the right to have your baby how you want it, when you want it, the way you want it, or not. And we're just messing that up by making people so fearful about having a baby. It's not that big a deal. It's not brain surgery. Girls have it at the prom in the bathroom. They have them in cabs and elevators all the time. It's not as bad as it thinks. It's the things that happen to them and what they do to them in the hospital that cause a lot of these problems that they have to worry about. That's why we're saying stay home, have your baby at home. It's a safer place for you. But we got to find the joy. We got to find the joy.
Oh, thank you so much, Miss Linda. And I just, I have two more questions that I'm going to ask quick so we can get to our audience questions. But speaking of that joy, right, and that lightheartedness and that hopefulness, Amber, I love how you started to talk about like decoloniality was happening at the same time. Like I think often we think about decolonial practices as like they happened before colonization and then we're bringing them back now, but that like the idea that our folks were always embodying and embracing these sort of decolonial practices the whole way through is just so powerful. And I was really inspired by you introducing us to this doll, thinking about like they didn't know we were seeds, right? I just wonder if you could share a little bit more about how you speak about this doll in your dissertation work and like other ways that you have seen this figure of the doll show up in conversations around Black birthing in Brazil and maybe across the diaspora, and how you're using it to like make sense of the work you're doing in your dissertation.
Thank you for that. You know, as you asked the question, just thinking of what Miss Linda just remarked on about we got to restore the sacredness, we got to restore the joy. This is a blessed rite of passage, and it has been desecrated, desacralized. The sacred and the spirit has been taken out of it. And that's by design. So not only through birthing, I guess the way I hold birthing in my sort of position as contributing to restoring the sacred to birth work is birthing is creation. And we create all the time. Even if you don't create a baby, a new life, a new human being, you create delicious food. You work with the elements of fire and water, heat, air. You work with the earth. This is a kind of a parallel, but when you asked the question, the first image that came to mind was during the October 7th Gaza situation, and amidst all of the chaos, the trauma, the cultural trauma that we were all wading through, I saw a video of two Black women in a house, in a kitchen, and one was doing the other's hair. She was making beauty, while simultaneously there was gratuitous, excessive destruction of life. So that image is consistent throughout our experience in North America, our experience through chattel enslavement, through the engine of colonialism and coloniality. We have always restitched tapestries. We have always creolized, created new foods. It was Ngombo in Nigeria. We met with the French and the Chickasaw in Louisiana, got some filet or sassafras, and now it's called gumbo. We create new things based on our encounter in the new place. That's creativity. That's creation, or it's a rebirthing, a constant and consistent rebirthing. For me, that's the fuel that keeps me going, so I don't wade into the deep end of the ocean of despair and grief. It's there. It's always there, right? And it requires tending. But holding that as a principle, holding that as my perception, the way I think of my people, you know, the way that my grandmother would feed homeless people. Her birthday was October 31st. Anybody who came by, she would feed, supporting life. She wasn't, and I would assert this about the inheritances from our ancestors in Black culture. She didn't practice necrophilic politics, the politics of death. Our people had a conviction around the politics of life, for the most part. I don't want to romanticize it or paint it with a broad stroke. But those core fundamentals that have sustained us, of just resurrecting again and again, regardless of what is encountered. So that's my answer.
Oh, what a shame. Thank you so much. It's just powerful to think about like birthing broadly as we're talking about Black birthing and matrilineal healing and the creation process and what that looks and feels like across generations of our matrilineal lineage. So thank you. And my last question before we get to our audience Q&A is for Markia. So we talked a lot about the realities of the birthing process for Black folks. We've talked about some of the harms, also the joys. I'm just wondering if you can share some advice for Black folks, Black families that are thinking about preparing birthing journeys, particularly for queer Black families, single Black families, families that often get left out of our conversations around birthing, and also for families that are centered in conversations of birthing. Like, what would you say to somebody that's like, look, I don't know a lot. I think I want to have a baby. Where do I start? What should I know? How should I like initiate this process so that it can be joyous and sacred?
That's an interesting question. We've had a lot more. I remember when Andrea sent me an email that families were coming in to meet with her and talk with her before they even conceived, trying to figure out what are the things that I need to know, what are the things I should be aware of, how should I prepare for having a baby. So back to what Mama Linda said, I honestly think like we need to be talking to these kids while they're in schools. It needs to start younger, having this conversation so that you're not waiting until you get pregnant. You're not waiting until after the fact. This should, if we go way, way, way back, you were just exposed. You saw these things. You were next to the granny midwife. You were next to the elder that they had to go get. You were there when they brought the granny midwife, and then there was birthing. I hear my grandfather talk about the story of how he came into the world, and so he was very much so aware of like all the things that occurred for him to come, earthside. It needs to be a normal conversation in our community. I know that there's been a lot of trauma that has happened that has silenced us, and we've gone into isolation around a lot of things. I think it's about, picking those brains and having those conversations. I see with my nieces now, just pushing their babies into strollers and whatnot, talking to them about what this baby means and how babies come into the world. So that's one thing. I think having the conversation with our community as early as possible, not waiting until folks get pregnant to figure out what to go with, what to do then. I think next, a lot of our families come in self-referred because they've done research and they have taken the time to figure out where are the Black providers. I know myself, haven't brought a baby into this world, but I know when it comes to anything of my health needs, I'm calling up the health insurance and I'm like, so can I get a list of Black providers, period, that can meet this need or meet that need. I have had many conversations with a lot of my clients in therapy that they have the right and they have the authority if they want to advocate for something in particular, and request it, that they can do so. Don't be afraid. Don't accept just because this is what they're giving to you, that this is what you have. If there are things that you want, speak up for it, advocate for yourselves. Again, back to what Mama Linda said, it's about helping people find their voice and feeling empowered to speak up. One of our mamas, I remember when I first met with her, she transferred her care over to us, but she said the reason why she transferred her care over to us, she said, because they told me I couldn't put on my birthing plan that the first hands that I wanted to touch my baby to be Black hands. And I said, well, 100% absolutely. We can put that on your birth plan. We can put it at the top of the birth plan. We can highlight it and we can make it bold if you want. And we'll hand out copies to everybody on the floor if that is what is necessary. And because she was able to speak that, and we put a plan in place with all of the nurses that were on the floor and letting the midwives know and the OBs knows that for this particular mom, this is something important, sacred that she wants for herself. That's exactly what she was able to receive and what she was able to get for the first hands to touch her baby were to be Black hands. But that's because she spoke, she advocated for herself. She had a provider that listened, and she found a team that would listen to her. So I think doing the research to understand who the providers are in the different places. The Earth app, which is coming out now and is spreading across the country, I think that is a place where families will be able to go to be able to get the research and understand what is happening at these different birthing centers and medical hospital institutions about what atrocities are happening in places, so that you can come in asking questions and holding them accountable for the things that are occurring and are happening. So shout out to the Earth app for being able to make things more public for families and a little bit easier to access. I think letting families know about the Earth app so that they can be aware that that is a resource for them. Almost in a way, it's like we're trying to develop our own green book for birthing, our little green book passport for birthing for our families, so that they know where to go, what not to go, and what to be aware of when they step into these places.
Ashe, thank you so much, Marquita. I'm just inspired to know that we have options. Because again, like Mama Linda said, so much of the narrative is that there's a hopelessness. And so just to know that we can advocate for ourselves, we have options, that there's resources. Yeah, it makes all the difference. So thank you. With the little bit of time we have left, thank y'all so much for your patience. I didn't want to cut nobody off because everything was just so rich. But we are so excited to hear from our audience. So if you have a question, please just go ahead and raise your hand. We're going to just take all the questions at once and then invite our panelists to do like a quick final reflections in response to the questions that feel in alignment. All right. Hi, Tammy. I see your hand up, and then Hermela. If anyone else has a question, go ahead and raise that hand and let me know. Hey, Tammy, how you doing? Uh-oh.